first time we tried to do scope 3 was back in 2018. And it was our first attempt and really just only had a spreadsheet, and it's had like 25 tabs. And they're trying to talk to each other, and we're trying to pull emission factors. It did take us almost over a year, to the point where we thought, we're not doing this every year. We're not going to do this again for another 5 years.
Welcome to the Carbon Management and Accounting Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Stainthorpe. This podcast is brought to you by Northstar Carbon and Impact, the carbon and sustainability management platform built by sustainability professionals for sustainability professionals. Northstar helps companies simplify GHG accounting, improve data quality, and stay audit ready across scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions, so teams can spend less time reporting and more time driving real impact. Today, I'm joined by Mandi McKay, Chief Sustainability and Social Impact Officer at Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. Mandi has spent over 17 years at Sierra Nevada, progressing from Sustainability Coordinator to her current C-suite role, a journey that reflects both her expertise and Sierra Nevada's commitment to elevating sustainability as a core business function. Sierra Nevada isn't just any brewery. They're the third largest craft brewer in the U.S. They built the only LEED Platinum production brewery in the country. They operate the largest solar array in craft brewing, and they've maintained true zero waste platinum certification at both their California and North Carolina facilities. Mandi recently led Sierra Nevada's partnership with Northstar Carbon to strengthen their carbon accounting capabilities. And she previously served on the Brewer Association's Sustainability Subcommittee, helping elevate sustainability practices across the entire craft brewing industry. If you've ever wondered what comprehensive, authentic sustainability looks like when it's been embedded in a company culture for over 40 years, or how to tackle the unique carbon accounting challenges of brewing, all the way from barley fields to cold chain, this episode delivers. Let's dive in. Mandi, thanks so much for joining me today. To start, tell us about what being a Chief Sustainability and Social Impact Officer at Sierra Nevada looks like on an average day, and what some personal highlights are that you'd like to share.
I really appreciate the invite to be on this podcast. I don't often get to talk a lot about our work, so I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, my role now, currently, I spend a lot of time really just helping my team do the actual work. And so it's the good and the bad. And as you talked about, I've been with the company a long time. And so my role has evolved quite a few times, from more tactical, task-based work up to my current role, where I spend a lot of time thinking about high-level strategy. So for most of the time, I am thinking about how our work around sustainability and social impact builds into the broader company strategy and how we're thinking about the future over the next 5 years. So I want to make sure what we're doing aligns with our broader company strategy. And I'm also making sure the work that my team does fits in that. We have the resources dedicated to it. It's aligning with the business strategy, and we're contributing to that strategy. So my team, they spend most of their time actually doing the work. So I have 2 people focused 100% on sustainability, and that's operational sustainability. Things like energy, water, waste, greenhouse gas emissions, again, maintaining our certifications that you mentioned. And then I have 2 people dedicated to employee engagement and community engagement. They're the ones on the ground really doing the work at our 2 sites and in the community. And I'm really helping them make sure all of their work is aligned to our broader goals and our vision.
Well, that sounds amazing. And again, just as someone who's a big fan of Sierra Nevada, it sounds like your team is getting a lot done, and sounds like you have the right people in place to really drive impact. So I did want to ask about your journey personally, because being there for over 17 years, you started as a sustainability coordinator, became a sustainability manager, and now you're the Chief Sustainability and Social Impact Officer. That progression to becoming a C-suite role is still relatively rare. Can you share what that journey looked like for you to elevate sustainability from an operational function to executive leadership looked like? And in that process, what changed in your scope of work? And what were the key skills that helped you be successful?
Sierra Nevada is headquartered in Chico, California, and that's where we're founded. And then now we have a second brewery in North Carolina, Western North Carolina. But in Chico, we have Chico State. I graduated, and 3 months later, there was an opening at Sierra Nevada for a part-time sustainability coordinator. And that role was to really support the then sustainability manager, who mostly around zero waste. So it was literally things around, making sure recycling bins were set up, finding the right outlet. I made biodiesel. We had a little biodiesel machine, thinking about composting. So I had a worm bin, and I would go around to all the employee break rooms and collect banana peels and food scraps and coffee grounds, and put them in the worm bin. Um, and so it's really focused on zero waste at the time, really task based, really kind of manual labor intensive. So I drove a forklift, emptied waste bins, and then as we grew and as we started doing more things like thinking about water and energy and our greenhouse gas emissions, you start adding kind of this broader view of what sustainability means. And so there's opportunities to grow and learn and develop. Um, Added North Carolina as our second brewery. So we were able to hire a counterpart for me out there. And then I eventually moved into a manager role to lead that person. And our team just continued to evolve. And so I feel really honored to represent it at this level now as Chief Sustainability Officer. But that's kind of been the progression. And so I really do feel I'm grateful, very excited, very proud to be in the role that I am now and lead the team that I have now because it continues to expand. One of the things I'm most proud of in the last couple of years is formalizing all of that work into an outward facing kind of package that we're calling Up Forward. And that's our 5-year vision to 2030 and the ambitions that we're working towards. We just launched that in 2025. So we'll be working on all of those ambitions, which includes greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2030.
Wow. Well, it's amazing to think about that progression and especially starting with a focus on zero waste and learning more and more about business operations over time. I'm just wondering if you see any skills that you feel like have been the through line throughout.
Do you think it's always staying open to learn? I mean, I have learned everything I know just working at the company and understanding how it fits, how what I do fits into what the company stands for, what the company's working on, customers think about it. So I think what has helped me most is recognizing that you are part of something bigger, which comes naturally with sustainability. I mean, I think what has helped me is just recognizing that I'm contributing to the company in a way that I feel is authentic to me. It's what I value. I appreciate that the company values it also. And so at every level, at every progression, it's just recognizing that you're just learning a little bit more each time about how it ladders up. And so obviously when I first started and I'm driving around on a forklift, I'm not really I had no idea about business financials or sales projections or the industry forecast for the year. But I did know that zero waste was important, recycling was important. So you just kind of do your best job at every level and you recognize that at every point that it does ladder up, it does matter. And now again, it's very cool to kind of see how it all really does ladder up into this broader strategy. So I think staying curious, being open to learn, and just doing the best that you can do at each stage and with the information that you have. Some of you don't have it all, but you just believe in the work that you're doing. Kept me going, I guess.
Wow. Well, it really helps to hear that. And I think for context, I wanted to go back to some of the origination story for Sierra Nevada, where Ken Grossman, when he started brewing, was using recycled dairy equipment back in 1980 because that's what he could afford. And so it felt like that founding ethos, reduce, reuse, recycle, was really how the company got started. And that was the business model from day one. I wanted to ask how that still shows up in your work today. Is that just a good story or does that genuinely shape decision making today?
My favorite questions because I think it's truly why I've stayed with the company for 17 years. It is absolutely true, very genuine to how we operate. For a lot of people, and I don't want to like discount, if you didn't start from day one, if you didn't have a Ken Grossman, like I get it. Like I feel so lucky because he truly is and was the first sustainability coordinator, manager, leader, whatever you want to call it. He is what drove all of the work that now I get to like shepherd and foster and continue to you said it from day one. He just has a His mind thinks very resourcefully. He's an engineer at heart, hates waste. He is so thoughtful about recovering heat, steam, and whatever it is, he's going to close that loop. It just like cannot, it's like who he is inherently. And you really can feel it and see it in our operations. I mean, he really built it. He is the foundation. And then what's so wonderful about being privately owned by him and his family, it's very much a part of their philosophy and how they run the business. Everything that we still do, we've been doing for 40 years. It really is embedded. And I think that's again, it's why sometimes I think we struggle to talk about it because it's so just, hey, that's how we do business, that's how we work. We don't need to talk about it. That's what we do. But no, it's absolutely core to who we are. It's true. And Ken is still, he's in my mind, he's in a lot of people's minds that have been here for longer than 10 years. We're always like, well, Ken would say this, Ken would want to do this, and he wouldn't want us to waste that, or he would be thinking this way. I feel very lucky to have had that history and that foundation as part of the company that I work for. So I recognize not everyone has had that. And you kind of have to build it maybe yourself or you're starting from scratch. It's just a unique situation.
Well, that is pretty amazing. And I wanted to go from that origination story to today or pretty recently. June 2025, Sierra Nevada announced a partnership with North Star Carbon to manage your GHG data and sustainability metrics. I wanted to ask what prompted this transition to using a dedicated software platform? And can you speak about what you are looking for and what this technology is going to help enable or advance for your team as you think about that iteration from how the company was founded to today and the challenges you're trying to solve in the future?
Yeah, actually, a little bit more on that last question. And I think every time we did something, it was kind of a leadership role in craft beer. I think about, we installed solar. We have one of the largest solar installations in craft beer. It's way back in 2006. We started installing solar. So now those are like almost obsolete at this point. And then we did a lot of work around energy or on-site energy, fuel cells, and microturbines, and all kinds of things. So if you really, that was our strength for many, many years, is this operational engineering, energy leadership, also zero waste, also water. We spent a lot of time thinking about the actual practices, processes, equipment, and the things that we were doing to reduce energy or make more of our own energy or reduce waste. All of that's great. What we weren't able to do at the same time was think about how to track all of those things, particularly around greenhouse gas emissions. So we spent over a decade really focused on scope 1 and 2. So those are easy places to start, which makes sense. And we would put that together each year and we would kind of, we'd get it done, but we didn't have a way to really, no one was really asking for it. We didn't have a good way to show it to anybody. We're like everyone else, probably. It's a spreadsheet that is not fun to look at. It's hard to build. It's kind of complicated. So again, about a decade of scope 1 and 2. And then the first time we tried to do scope 3 was back in 2018. And it was our first attempt and really just only had a spreadsheet. So that's what we were using. And it has like 25 tabs and they're trying to talk to each other and we're trying to pull emission factors from all the places, which we can get into, but really arduous and really time consuming. And I have I'm lucky again, I have a team of people. We have 3 of us that are kind of thinking about environmental sustainability and thinking about greenhouse gas emissions. And it would take us like 6 months. I mean, it did take us almost over a year to really get our scope 3 done, our first one, to the point where we thought, we're not doing this every year. We can't do it every year. We got 2018 done, and then we thought 5 years. We're not going to do this again for another 5 years. And then sure enough, 5 years came and went, and we were trying to figure out how are we going to do scope 3 again. I think we're at the point where we need help, and we have looked at lots of platforms. We've looked at them, we demoed them. Honestly, it was always like, I don't know if this is really going to help us, like save a lot of time, or it's really expensive. We're kind of right at that cusp where we're small, but not small enough where we can just manage in a spreadsheet anymore, but then not large enough to maybe invest in something that's really expensive or that maybe a really large company could do. And it never quite made sense to get some outside help either. Like we're right on the edge of like, could we do it in-house or could we not? And so finally, we did get to where we're like, we really need to, this is not wasting our time, but we need to spend our time on the actual work and less on the data gathering. And we also need a way to talk about it with our leadership team and with our our partners across operations. Like, how are we going to get them engaged in emission reduction efforts if we can't have a nice visual to show them or the way to show them the data that they can understand? And we could not do that in spreadsheets. So that's what kind of prompted us to really think seriously about a platform and getting some help. And we really were focused on a couple things. One, the data gathering to make that clear, and then visualizing the data, whether it's a pie chart, a graph, or something, even just a better table, like a list of information that we can show in a meeting or to our leadership. And then also a better way to look year over year and start looking at scenario planning. And so North Star Carbon was able to really help us with that. And we've been onboarding with them for about a year. We want to get all of our historical data in. So that's actually been taking time. But now once we have all that historical data in, we can start doing the future modeling, the scenario planning. We're getting the visuals that we need. We're able to show trends over time. So it's really kind of been the bell for what we were looking for.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I guess my own personal experience very much mirrors that, where the complexity of trying to pull together all of your scope 3 data can be quite an undertaking, especially the first time. And the data gathering piece, or sometimes I call it the data janitorial work, to actually get the data in the right format to do calculations, it's a very big lift. So yes, I hope, talking to others, you don't feel alone in that journey. Can you help us understand some of the carbon accounting challenges with brewing? So there's agricultural inputs like barley and hops. There's energy intensive malting. There's the brewing process itself. There's packaging materials and sometimes heavy glass bottles or lightweight aluminum. And then you have a refrigerated cold chain. Where does the carbon footprint of a Sierra Nevada pale ale actually live across that journey? And do you start to see hotspots that then change the way you think about it?
And so everything you just mentioned, yes, that's like we are looking at all of those things as part of our Sierra Nevada's carbon footprint. And it is everything from barley, the inputs and the impact that barley farming has, or hop farming, all the way through a consumer drinking a pale ale and then figuring out whether to recycle it or dispose of it or do it, hopefully recycle it. But it's literally everything along that chain that you just mentioned. I think obviously that it can be very, it's overwhelming and it feels onerous, but you really just break it down. And sometimes, at least what I've learned, we've now done scope 3 a couple times. You do have to think through, and this is where North Star has been helpful. When do you use an industry emission factor that's like an industry average, or when do you think about trying to get a very supplier specific emission factor or finding something that's very specific to brewing? And the challenges in brewing, one challenge you mentioned is that we have barley farmers, but we don't actually buy our barley from them. We buy malt from a maltsters. The barley is grown by the barley farmer. It goes to a maltster that malts it, which is very energy intensive. But some of our maltsters are doing great work around energy reduction and emissions reduction. And then so we're buying, we're a customer of them. And so sometimes it's a little hard to get, it's difficult to get agriculture supply chain specific emissions for farm farming. North Star is able to help us sometimes think through an industry average or something that's comparable to barley that is available on an industry level. Because you can kind of not waste time, but you can end up going in circles and probably don't need to. And then the couple other things I've learned doing scope 3 that I found really interesting. You mentioned the cold supply chain. So we take that very seriously, and beer does not get warm at all from the time it leaves our brewery to the time it gets to the grocery store that you might buy it from. We take that very seriously, and keeping it cold as soon as you let beer get warm, usually you get some quality impacts there, or it can have it. And so we are thinking about, it's energy intensive, right? So we're transporting it on a refrigerated truck. It's going into a distributor warehouse that's also refrigerated. It goes into a retailer like the grocery store where it's refrigerated, and then it goes to your home. And so we are thinking about each one of those stages and how to account for the refrigeration impacts. One thing I learned that was very interesting about the beer supply chain is that the refrigerated step at the distributor warehouse is actually not included or it's not standard to include that in a carbon accounting for a beverage company or for a brewery. So we do take into account the refrigeration of transportation to that distributor, and then we think about it once it's a retailer. But for whatever reason, the refrigeration at the distributor phase is pretty immaterial when you think about a whole carbon footprint of a case of beer. But those are the types of things that are helpful to North Star or through others. You just get that kind of guidance and that help as you're thinking complex as scope three. And every supply chain is different. So, I know now a lot about beverage supply chain and particularly beer, but it's going to be different depending on whatever industry you're in, tech or food or apparel. They're all going to have their unique kind of scope three nuances.
That helps a lot to hear. And I guess I wanted to dive just a little deeper on scope three. It feels like there are limitations to what data you can get, especially if you might already be purchasing from somebody that's aggregating materials earlier. But I wasn't sure if you had anything more you could share about scope three and where you feel like you have been able to get traction either in better data or in trying to drive initiatives with other value chain partners.
Mentioned in the first time we attempted to do scope three was back in 2018. And we've already, so now, being early 2026, we've already adjusted how we think about scope three already. Like we've already decided, like we've looked back and we're like, well, we did it this way in 2018 because X, Y, and Z, because we had this supplier who didn't have any data for us. And so we used an industry average. Now we have a couple suppliers that actually are doing their own scope greenhouse gas accounting. And now they have better data for us. So we've evolved. So like for some suppliers where that has been the case, and I think some of that, we can't take all the credit, but we do fairly regularly. We're talking to, especially our largest suppliers, and we're asking them those questions around, are you keeping track of your greenhouse gas emissions? Are you doing XYZ practices? Do you think about energy reductions or energy efficiency? I would like to think that some of us asking them those questions then helps them, pushes them more to start looking at their own accounting and doing their own investment in this work because they know we're looking for it and we're looking for it from all of our suppliers. And it is somewhat of a competitive advantage. You can offer a lower a least impactful product at a same price. Why, we're going to probably go with you because you're at least thinking about the same thing and you understand that we are part of their scope three and vice versa, right? So like, I think, again, already since the last time we looked at scope three several years ago, we've adjusted how we've got better data from some of our suppliers. We've also thought differently about materiality. Back then, being our first time, we thought, hey, let's try to get supplier specific emission factors as often as we can from as many vendors as we can, because that's the highest and best, most accurate thing to do, which is true. But we've realized that, hey, really we should be focusing on our most material suppliers and our most material ingredients. And if we can get supplier specific of those things versus just any vendor that will give it to us, that's probably a better use of our time. And so we've already kind of evolved that this second round as we're doing scope three again. We're thinking just a little bit better about materiality, a little more efficiently about how we spend our time and our resources. And so we do look at just, what's our largest raw materials and what's our largest input. So it's things like, it's obviously malt, it's hops, it's packaging materials, and transportation. Those are the ones that and refrigeration. We've learned now over time, those are the biggest areas of focus for us in scope three. Scope one and two obviously are different animals, but in scope three, what are the things that we're going to actually be able to impact? That's where we're going to spend our time. That's where we're going to try to get the best data. That's where we're going to try to see the best, or do the most scenario planning. So we can look at, hey, if we work with our supplier and lighten our case boxes by 20%, what will that do to our packaging, the packaging slice of our greenhouse gas scope three pie? So that's now how we're thinking about doing it now, which is part of that. As you said, it evolves, you learn, you kind of think differently. In scope three, there are standards, there's protocols, you have to align with those, but you can also learn to get better data and improve.
Well, thank you for letting us peek behind the curtain a little bit and talking about that process. I had specifically wanted to ask you about collaboration because Sierra Nevada has done some very interesting things, like establishing the Western North Carolina Brewery Recycling Cooperative, which, as I understand, over 80 breweries participate in. You've built a partnership with the National Park Foundation, and then you've had industry leadership through the Brewers Association. How do you see that driving additional value for Sierra Nevada?
Start listing off some of those initiatives. Those are some of my favorite ones. I mean, I'll just say that brewing and craft beer in particular is a pretty collaborative industry. So there really is a lot of inherent collaboration, and that's just fun and great. And again, it makes another thing about working for Sierra Nevada and the craft beer industry so wonderful. There is a lot of collaboration, and there's a lot of shared success, and rising tide raises all boats. Like those, that type of thinking is very, we're still competing, but it's a very collaborative industry to begin with. And so we also recognize we're a large craft brewer. So we're small when it comes to maybe brewing as a whole. So you think about really big breweries, we're actually really, really small compared to some of the big domestic breweries. But we're a very large craft brewer. And so we can kind of play in both spaces. One, lead in the craft beer space, which we've done, and a couple of things you mentioned, the recycling cooperative that you talked about, North Carolina, where our second brewery is. There's a lot of other small craft brewers. It's a really popular craft beer region and a lovely brewing scene out there. But when you're really small, you don't generate enough material to like own a baler, right? So like a lot of times recycling vendors they're not gonna pick up stuff from you because you have a very small volume. It doesn't make sense for them from an economic perspective. So the goal of the cooperative was to basically bring all those breweries material together so that together they have a large enough volume that it can actually get diverted from the landfill, separated out. You really, recycling is driven by volume. So if you have a lot of volume, you can usually get something recycled or diverted. And so the point there was that we can use our leverage and our power to basically organize a way for all these smaller breweries to bring all their materials together. So we can do that when it comes to the craft beer scene. We can lead, we can help speak for the industry. That was part of the work I did on the Brewers Association Sustainability Subcommittee, and they do great work. On the flip side, we then also need to collaborate maybe with our competitors or with even others outside of the craft beer industry because we're not big enough to maybe make impact um, with our largest suppliers. So if you think about like a can supplier or glass bottle supplier, we might have really good relationships with them, but we might be a really small customer for them, right? So then we may not have that kind of leverage or impact upstream the way we would within the craft beer space. And so that's where collaboration really comes in to play. Are looking forward to doing more of that and need to do more of that, especially when you think about upstream. Downstream's a little different, but if you're talking about barley farmers, hop growers, and again, the packaging manufacturers, that needs more than just one voice, working with them. It's easier for them and more helpful for them if they have multiple customers, asking them for certain things or thinking along the same lines. So that's where the industry groups help, collaborations help, partnerships help. Um, and, it's really just better when you have more voices.
Well, I think moving from collaboration outside the company to maybe collaboration inside the company, one of the things that I think is remarkable here, I'm just holding up a can of the Sierra Nevada Big Little thing, is on majority of cans, right on the front, it says family owned, operated, and argued over. Where do you see family involvement as helping support sustainability in a way that I think has helped you be successful?
My favorite story about that slogan is that there was a lot of arguing whether to put that slogan on the can. So it is very authentic in the sense that there were a true family and the family ownership. It's unique in that yeah, there's a lot of arguing about what to do. But the family feels so strongly about the company, the brand. They're very invested. They're lovely people, and they take it seriously. And so it's true to the core. So that slogan is very authentic. But I think being family owned helps all of them and the broader company generationally. So they don't think about, just the next 6 months or just the next year. They are not as concerned about short-term gains. They're thinking about the next generation, their kids, they're able to think differently than maybe companies that are not privately owned or not family owned. For sustainability, you have to think long term. A lot of times it does pay off quick and there's a quick ROI and it makes all great sense and we're all good to go. But sometimes it takes, 5 years. It's a 5-year investment rather than a 1-year payback on something. One of my favorite stories about it is Ken, but it's really the family. Many, many years ago, there was nowhere to send organic waste in Chico or nearby. All food waste, anything coming out of a restaurant or like break rooms, that was all going to the landfill. There was no composting. The closest place was like 150 miles away, which doesn't make sense to drive a truck 150 miles just to compost something. It really didn't make any sense, but it bothered Ken and the family to like, really shouldn't be throwing this stuff away. This is like, it should be composted. This is good organic material. And so we invested in a in-vessel composting machine that is still the only one in the US, and it's called the Hot Rot, and it was wonderful. But did it make sense financially? Did it have a business payoff? No. Did it have a cultural, community, social impact payoff? Yes. And so those things are really hard to, a traditional business probably would not have done that. A family-owned, argued over company said, yeah, we think it's important to compost and we feel really strongly about it, so we're going to do it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's really compelling to see that on every single can and think about what the backstory means and how that actually impacts decision making. To build on that, I did want to ask, Sierra Nevada has grown quite a bit over time to now being the third largest craft brewer in the US, the seventh largest overall. That's pretty tremendous growth thinking about from where the company started. Wanted to ask, as you grow, what gets harder from a sustainability standpoint and what gets easier? And do you see ways that that actually impacts your carbon emissions, that growth may be driving emissions in different directions, but maybe there's efficiencies that you can find as you scale up?
I've seen a lot of, again, I've seen a lot of change over the last 17 years. It's both what you said. There's some things that get harder, it's easier. Things that get easier are we can invest more capital in things if and when we want to. So something like North Star Carbon and a platform, it finally made sense for us to do that. You get large enough where you got enough data, you've got enough resources, ready to take that next level where you want to communicate it differently and set goals to it. So getting larger helps with that, and it helps you formalize. And again, you have more resources to invest in either capital projects or platforms or whatever it is. So that gets easier. That can be really hard when you're small. It's harder to maintain some of the employee investment in things. We had a bike riding program, so encouraging employees to bike to work, right? And we had that for many, many years, and it made sense, and it was easy to do. And we only had 100 employees, and you could do fun raffles and all these things. As you get bigger, it's harder to run programs like that. And then we ran into a challenge where we opened up the brewery in North Carolina, and she goes flat. She goes easy to ride your bike to. There's really good bike infrastructure. And then we open up the second brewery in North Carolina, and our employees out there have like no way to ride their bike to work. Like it's just like we put it out in this beautiful like outside of town, this wonderful tourist destination. It's beautiful. You really can't ride your bike there. So it's like that's like one small example of like we've grown, and like those little sometimes those like really fun small local regional initiatives that are kind of part of who you are, and they might be part of your sustainability program. They don't always scale or translate, or you can't really keep them going. That's like one example, but I've seen a couple of those types of things that are harder to maintain as you get bigger. But then again, what gets easier is you have more resources to do larger projects that have more impact, and you have that larger voice, like we were talking about within the industry, or maybe with a supplier or with a partner. You have more standing, you have more leverage, you have more leadership. And where that also has come into play for us is our work around policy and advocacy. So when you get bigger and you are a leader, again, you have a strong voice when it comes to advocating for policies, either at the state or federal, even regional level, to impact and try to help drive where you think policy should be headed. And that can be for us, we spend a lot of time advocating for renewable energy and energy credits and greenhouse gas emission reductions and just things that allow companies or states to do a lot of the work that we've already done, helping them make that easier for companies to do, and it's a part of a business strategy. And so we spend a lot of time working with our advocacy partners, and that has gotten easier. So as you get bigger and as you grow, and have a bigger voice, and that is really impactful and important at those levels outside of like your wall.
Well, I want to say thank you because I think we need to have leadership both operationally and on the policy level. And so really wanted to highlight the work that you and Sierra Nevada have led there. And that really brings me to wanting to ask about the Hop Forward campaign impact report that you've released. And the reason that I was using the word campaign, and you can tell me if you'd prefer something different, I think it's very innovative that Hop Forward, which really sets out kind of both accomplishments and also where Sierra Nevada is headed, is not just a standard impact report, but you also produced a Hop Forward beer. And I thought that was so cool to see a way to engage your customers by both talking and really explaining what you're doing and where you're going, but also trying to showcase that with the Hop Forward beer. So I was hoping you could speak a little bit about that effort and also why you decided to not just do the report, but make a Hop Forward beer and what that represents to Sierra Nevada.
So I mentioned at the top, I think Hop Forward is something I'm most proud of in the time I've spent at Sierra Nevada because we've done all this great work and we've been doing it for 40 years, but we've never had a great way to talk about it and share it. We would try, but it was very sort of one off and it like, oh, we now have this really cool on-site energy system. And here's now we've got this brewery recycling cooperative, like really cool. Like we'd have these like sort of one-off stories, but nothing that would help us. To your point, it's like a campaign. It didn't have a package. We didn't have a way to talk about it ongoing as part of like a broader business strategy. So, and a lot of times companies start with the opposite. They come up with their campaign and their slogan and their like, their package and then they start doing the work. And we're like the opposite. We've done all this great work. And so really Hot Forward for me and for us, it's kind of it's a recommitment to the work we've already been doing. And it's a way to package it all up and share it in a way that I think makes more sense with people. It doesn't need its own, like, we don't have to keep retelling the sustainability story now. We just have Hop Forward that it's a platform that helps us like share our progress on this work. And it's also future facing. So again, we've dedicated so much time and effort and resources to the actual work. This is the first time we've set actually external future facing ambitions, formalized goals for the next 5 years, heading to 2030 on the things we want to achieve around greenhouse gas emissions, water, source efficiency, philanthropy, and community engagement, and employee engagement. So it formalizes the work we've really always done. We've just never had the words for it and never put it into a formalized structure with 5 pillars and goals under each pillar, right? So it's a reformulation, a recommitment, and a package of really everything we've always done and a way to talk about it. And so we launched that last year. Again, we've got about 5 pillars and there's specific goals under each one. It will have a report each year, which you talked about. So we launched our first one last year, which was a little bit more of a look back on here's everything we've done, and then here's what we're planning to do over the next 5 years. So we're working now on the first actual progress report, which will come out in a couple months in April. And the point of the report is really just to hold ourselves accountable and be transparent about how we're doing on those goals, how we're progressing, and why or why not, or are we need to change them to make things harder or whatever. And so we'll be releasing each year how we're doing towards our achievement of those ambitions. The beer, and again, I appreciate you bringing it up. Our CEO was actually like, hey, you've got to have a beer. Like, that's what we do. Like, you better have a beer as part of Hop Forward. Hey, we definitely should do that. But brewing's not my background. I don't tend to think about the actual like product. So credit goes to him for saying you absolutely have to have a beer. And he's right. He's obviously completely right. So each year what we'd like to do is showcase some different thing. It could be an ingredient, it could be the way that we're making it, it could be the packaging. Each year we'll probably have a different take on how we want to showcase something related to Hop Forward in that beer. So last year, we had organic hops and locally sourced barley. Coming up, we'll have barley that we've grown ourselves, that's been organic or generally grown on site at our breweries. So that barley will be part of the Hop Forward beer. And each year we'd like to do something that highlights either something we're doing or something we're partnering on, or again, something that's related to Hop Forward. So it'll be a different product each year.
Well, I'll be excited to see the next versions of Hop Forward. And I really do appreciate that you're both being transparent about where you are on the journey, holding yourself accountable, but you're also allowing customers to actually taste and experience what that process looks like. And I think that's very compelling because it takes something that can sometimes be abstract and makes it very tangible. You can taste climate leadership.
Yeah, and you have a good point on not everyone's going to want to read a report, and I promise we you make it very short and digestible and easy, no one wants to read like a 30-page report. But to your point, you might want to skim it, and then what you really can do is just drink the beer and at least know that we're working on really good stuff, and you can feel good about the beer that you're drinking at the same time.
Yeah, working on really good stuff and making really good beer.
Yes.
So I think that brings us to our final segment, which is the implementation minute. And there's been so much that we've covered already in this conversation. But Mandy, I wanted to ask, imagine that it's Monday morning, a sustainability professional just finished listening to this episode on their commute, they're headed to work. What's one thing they should do when they get to their desk? Something that maybe takes 30 minutes or less and either helps with their inventory, their greenhouse gas management, or just move their career in the right direction?
Really good question. And to break it down, it depends on where they're at in their journey, is what I would say. And so if you've never done greenhouse gas accounting, what I think is totally worth your time. It'll take longer than 30 minutes, but there's some really good basic greenhouse gas protocol training available from the greenhouse gas protocol. It's not that expensive. It's not overwhelming. It will take you about a day, but it is really worth just wrapping your head around scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. That is worth the time. And then the other thing I would recommend is, again, if you've never done greenhouse gas accounting or just starting, scope 1 and 2 is you really should start there and just not even think about scope 3. Give it a few years and wrap your head around it, because there's a lot you can do within scope 1 and 2, and it'll help you understand where your biggest opportunities are operationally for what you can control. Scope 3 is important, and it is 85% of our footprint, right, is our scope 3, but we have very little control, much less control. And so I would encourage people to hyper focus on scope 1 and 2 if you've not started greenhouse gas accounting at all. Do the basic greenhouse gas accounting. And then I think generally find a company or leader or a mentor that you can just check in with once in a while. If you have that opportunity, I think sometimes you just need to bounce ideas off somebody or get some guidance or leadership from a company that you respect or a person that you follow. I think that is worth time to just get ideas and insight and guidance from someone that you trust and respect.
Thank you. I think that's great advice. And I wanted to follow that up by asking if you have a resource that you'd recommend our audience check out. I know you mentioned some of the greenhouse gas training materials, but I don't know if there's any other resources that you would like to flag that you found helpful.
It's been so long since often I'm like helping write those resources. I would honestly it's general sustainability. GreenBiz is actually a really great conference to attend. It's big, it's a little expensive, but it is very comprehensive, and you're definitely going to learn something, and you're definitely going to meet people. I mean, I think if you've got an industry group that has got some sustainability, it's helpful, I think, to focus a little bit it depends on the industry that you're in.
Well, Wolf is, and then working within your industry groups. But no, I think that's very helpful. Before we wrap, I want to give a quick thank you to North Star Carbon and Impact for supporting this podcast. If you're looking for an easier, more transparent way to manage carbon and ESG data and prepare for audits, reporting, and decarbonization planning, visit northstarcarbon.com to learn more or request a demo. Mandy, I want to say thank you again. Where can listeners connect with you or follow your work at Sierra Nevada?
So I'm personally on LinkedIn, so you can always reach out to me there. And then if you go sierranevada.com/sustainability, you'll find some really great maps. We have some interactive maps on there where you can actually virtually tour all the sustainability work that we're doing at both of our brewing sites. And then there's also the Hop Forward report that's on that same page. We'll be launching the new one here in a few months in April, as well as the Hop Forward beer. So you'll see that on all of our socials as well.
Great. Well, I want to say thanks again for joining us today. Mandy, really appreciate it. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. If this episode was valuable to you, please share your biggest takeaway on LinkedIn and tag us so we can continue the conversation there. Thanks for listening.